Okay, so what we are creating today is basically a code along out of a chapter, chapter 10 of the Murach ASP.NET Core MVC second edition textbook. And this is a to-do list app. And what I like about this app is, we've built this in a couple of languages now. We built this in the JavaScript class. I think we built it again last semester. Now, it's just one of those apps that's a good project as a stepping stone along the way, is to build some sort of checklist to-do app. And so it's just always a good project. You see that always is a good recommendation, is like a hobby or a practice app to build. So they actually give a solution. So we're going to go through it. And so it's going to start off by creating a project and a C# web project, ASP.NET Core web app. So I got to get these filters in here, make sure everything's installed correctly. Choose the model view controller pattern and ToDo. ToDo app, project name ToDo, and spin it up. All right, let's get this going. And we start out with the different models. So we start out by creating some classes. So adding, and you can do this. So your to-do items are going to have a category. So we make a public class category with an ID and a name. And you can kind of see that category of home, shopping, contact, and work. These are the different categories. You can see that on that screenshot. So that's what we're coding here.
What page is this on, buddy?
We're on page 387. Okay, so category class is pretty straightforward. It just has a category ID and a category name. Of course, we'll seed these we'll seed this with some seed data like pretty soon after our next couple of classes. So then we create a status class. Public class status. Prop string status ID. Okay, and again, what is the status? Well, you can see the status is open, status is completed. So we're going to have a status ID and a status name. And finally, the to-do class itself. So add a class. Primary key for the ID. Get and set a description. We've got some validation. Been a little bit since we've done validation. got a description. Please enter a due date. So then we have a public date time nullable called due date. Get and set. We then need to bring in the category and the status. So we're going to bring in the category ID. Basically as the foreign key to this object as a foreign key. Category ID is required. So we bring in the category ID and the category object itself, public. Going back and looking at something in a previous chapter. Not important. Okay, category. So we got in the category ID and the category. Now we need to bring in the status ID and the status. Public status. And finally, here's an overdue property that returns Boolean. And the arrow notation, so this is just like a get block, and we're going to get, does the status ID, which is a string, equal open, and due date is less than today. It's going to return true or false if the status is open and the due date is less than today. Right, so if the due date was yesterday, the due date is less than today, therefore is overdue. So we'll use this overdue property. And then to generate the database, we need to go to our package manager console. Actually, not the console, the GUI. Browse. Entity Framework SQL Server. Microsoft Entity Framework Core SQL Server. Install. Finished. Entity Framework Core Tools. Install that. Good. And Entity Framework Core. Just installing all three because that's what we've done all semester. Okay, that should allow us to make a context class. ToDo context. Inherits from DB context. We need to bring in DB context. So a lot of times we could show potential fixes in using Entity Framework Core. So we add our using statement to recognize the class DB context. Make our constructor okay, so our constructor is pretty much boilerplate, what we've been doing all semester. Public DB set, so this is our first table, to-do table. So we have a table called to-do, we have a table called category, categories get set. And finally, a table for status. And we're going to seed, we seed some categories and some statuses, but that's it. So here's our seed data. We're going to work with the category. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Home and home. EX for exercise. Shop for shopping. Open and closed. Okay, close the curly, close the curly, close the curly. And see what we forgot. Let's go to the package manager console. Oh, of course. Okay, so of course what I forgot was in my program CS. And in my app settings JSON, I forgot those couple of things there. So let's start in app settings JSON. And here, put a comma, put in our connection strings. And to, in quotes, to do context. There's so many rooms for typos in here, so I'm going to double check my okay, get that all in one line, double check it. To do context, server, local DB, MSQL, local DB, database. To do's, trusted connection, true, multiple active result sets is true. Okay, and then right before the build, browser configuration, get connection string. Semicolon at the end. Double check this one. Builder.services add db context, ToDo context, options, arrow. Options use SQL Server. Builder configuration. Get connection string, ToDo context. That we created ToDo context right there.
You showed, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Great. It generated the migration file with an up method to create categories, statuses. So we can continue by running that update database. Typo. Good find. Saw it before me. So this comma should be trusted connection equals true semicolon. Multiple active result sets equals true. Save. I'm going to delete this initial file and rerun that command to add migration initial to regenerate that file, and then update database. Done. Object Explorer, databases, to-dos, tables. You know what? I need to delete both. Okay. Let's delete this database, close connections, and I'm going to delete the snapshot as well as the migration file. Now, this has the data in it that I was looking for. Refresh. Now we've got categories, view data, statuses. We do not have any to-dos yet. So the next thing in order here is to make the filters class, which obviously would use those drop-down lists to apply some filters. And in that filters class, we have a constructor which takes an array of strings. No, I'm sorry. Not an array, just a string. And let's make the properties public string filter string. Now it's just a get block. So it's a read-only property. Okay, so here's some properties. And this is an operator that we did not do a whole lot with in our C# class. So the way that read-only properties work, like this, is that you can only set them in a constructor, right? So notice this is our constructor for the class, and that's why we're able to set a value for these read-only properties. Again, outside of the constructor, you can only get them, but that's how you can work with these read-only properties, is you can only set them in the constructor. And so they do wind up splitting this string into an array. So here's our string array called filters, and we're splitting at the hyphen. And so this will be one hyphenated string. It's kind of demonstrated here. Okay, so this double question mark basically says, hey, assign the property of filter string equal to this value if one exists, but if it's null or empty string, then instead apply, it's kind of like an if-else. If this is a truthy value, if you will, then assign that value. Otherwise, assign all. If I'm ringing a bell, they call that the null coalescing? Yeah, null coalescing operators. I'll go back and click on this one. All right, that just, this says, hey, that you can make an integer nullable. This says, hey, write the value of a unless it doesn't exist, then write backup instead if it doesn't exist. So that's that little bit of C#. Category ID. So let's set our category ID equal to the first filter. The do equal to the second filter. Equal to the third. There's our 4 properties. There's a bunch of more properties. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more properties. And they all return bool. So is there any category ID not equal to all? True or false? Same thing for has a due date. So this property returns a dictionary. Do filter values returns a dictionary. Need bless you. One more set of curlies here.
Bless you.
I believe Control KD, or is it Alt KD? No.
To comment that. Oh.
Format. View.
Got some buggy on there anyway.
Control KD.
It doesn't work with stuff like that. It's so weird.
Yeah. Okay, that's the end of the filters class. Okay, on to the home controller. So I'm going to close filters. Just do a build to make sure it's currently compiling. One succeeded. Home controller. Get rid of this logger, home controller. Don't need privacy. Don't need that. Okay, basically same difference. I'm going to call this one CTX. Let me just say CTX context. So this index method should take an ID into it. Okay, create an object called filters. Pass that into the constructor of the filters class. And you kind of saw what that does. Brings that in, splits it. And sets, if it's category ID would be all, do would be all, status ID would be all, if that was empty. So like I'm imagining the first time this hits, there are no filters. So filter string is going to be all, and then category ID would be all, do would be all, status ID would be set to all. It's the way that's going to work on the first boot of this page. Load up all the categories in view bag, all the statuses in view bag. And so I think, off the camera, Vinny, you mentioned this, is that the book has parentheses here as if it's a method. We didn't code it as a method, so one solution would be to go back into this here and make this a method. However, you could also just keep it a property by leaving the parentheses off, and that would work as well. And so that would be a typo on page 391. We need to bring in the models.
No, it's your namespace is called the same as.
Yeah. So our project is named ToDo and our model is named ToDo, and they're conflicting. So we'll rename this to ToDo demo. Let's rename that way. Let's see if that's gonna. Let's bring that back here. No, okay, so I'm not gonna rename it that way. I'm gonna take it back to just ToDo. That didn't work, so I'm gonna rename it another way. I'm gonna rename my namespace ToDo demo. That's gonna be the right way of doing it in the code, not in the Solution Explorer. Let's hit enter. And then this just becomes ToDo. Then it's recognized. So what I had to do to fix that was rename my namespace. And now I'll just rename this ToDo demo, just make that happy, and finish my query, and then my red squiggly should go away. Okay, context. dot ToDo's, which is the name of my database. Okay, we'll just keep on going. Kind of looking ahead, this C# should all be understandable from what we've been through. Keep in mind we have a filters object called filters, and it was constructed to have a category ID, a do, and a status property. And then based on that, there's a has category that's not all, has due date that's not all, has status that's not all. So we end up using all those properties. So if there is a has category property, then we update our query with the where clause. And then it's kind of copy and paste for the next one. Except for the next one is a status. Has status. Status ID. Filters. Status ID. Has due date is a little bit more complicated. Create a date time object equal to today. Is passed as Boolean true or false. Update the query with the where clause. Ooh. Query dot where. So again, is passed looks at the due date, returns true or false. If it says the word passed. greater than today. Kind of your three options, right? It's in the past, it's in the future, or it's today. Finally, we execute our query. Ordering it by the due date to lists. Send the to-do tasks to the view. You too. Okay, second method's a get method for an add. Obviously, we're going to have to code that view as well. And we need a post for the add. Obviously, this does data validation, adds it to the database, saves those changes, redirects you to the home action, home controller index action. Otherwise, send you back to the same view you came from, and reloads the view bag. Here's our string array called filters. I don't remember if we did this in this class or another one used this join, right? But we've got an array of strings here, and you can put them into one big string. And separate them with hyphens. So it's kind of the opposite of a split. That's why you get all hyphen all hyphen all. So this hard codes, hey, get the ID from the URL, from the route. Don't look for it from anywhere else. And then bind a to-do object called selected. We hit the database using that object's ID. So let's read out of the database. If it's not null, let's close it. So this action of mark complete should update a individual to-do item to mark it as closed. Okay, and a method called delete complete. Hit all of the to-dos that have a status ID of closed, loop through them, remove each individual one, and save the changes. Redirect to the home page with your IDs as your filter. Okay, a lot of code in that home controller, so as we kind of flush this out, I think it makes sense to step through the code too, not just write it and make sure you understand it, but to step through it with some breakpoints at some point when we get there. So then the next is to look at the layout, which is under shared layout. And just kind of going right off of here, we're going to delete the header, div class container. So kind of back up into the title called My Tasks. So here's my title. I'm just going to say My Tasks. A link to Bootstrap. Here's some custom CSS. We'll just leave that in there for now. Div class container. Side of the container. Okay, we have a main tag with render body in it. Close the container, no footer. I'm going to leave these Bootstrap JavaScript links in there. Leave my scripts in there. Actually, Josh, you pointed this out the other day that your section here had an await and then an asynchronous call.
Yeah, that's how it was generated.
That's how it's generated. Yeah. And so that's the layout, which brings us to the index view next. Home index. And app model enumerable to do. In other words, you're bringing in a list of to do. If I go back to the controller index, here's our lists that we're sending into this view. And we'll just get this div class of row, this row, just kind of get something. So we can look at a page. Been writing a lot of code. Okay, my task, this is a row. I never like to write like a screen of code and then test it. Like, I like to test in smaller intervals, right? It's what you're supposed to do. So the fact that we did that whole controller without testing anything, I don't like that, but it's kind of what we're in the pattern of doing anyways. So on the outer row, we've got like call medium 2, which leaves call medium 10 left over, right? We're adding up to 12. So this is going to be our filters basically on the left, and then our table on the right. And so when you submit this form, it's going to call the action method called filter, and it's a post. So filter right here, post. See if I can get this into more viewable space. Auto hide you. Drop you down. Let me retype that. Going haywire. So as you're coding this, and I know not everyone's where I'm at, it's just worth noting that you could look at the overload. You could look at the different overloads of this select list constructor, and it kind of tells you what each piece is. Is it the value field of the list? Is it the name field that they're seeing? This one here is the selected value. So if there is a view bag filters category ID, it's going to select one of these items based on the filter that's already been applied. So just load that up and test it. Good. Now do filters. Gets that returned. So view bag do filters, which comes from up here, view bag do filters, which comes from here, filters do filter values, which ultimately comes from all the way back here, right here. Future, past, and today. Pass through the chain all the way up to the front end. Okay, so let's load that up. That should be our third drop down coming from the database. So that comes from the database. This comes from the model. We didn't store that in the database. This comes from the database. Then we need a submit button. This is it. Typo, ASP route ID is empty. Again, that gets generated for us in that little bit of code in the model. You can see here it kind of does put up in the URL call all. If I go back, homepage, exercise filter, ex all future all. So it's at least getting our URL correct. And then again, there will be some where clauses that use those values. To update what we're seeing on the task list. Onto the call medium 10. Okay, so the other, lots of code. The other column is where we're actually going to display our to-do.
See your future and past work. So when I do future, it doesn't show anything. But when I do past, it shows both. Even though one's in the past, one's in the future. it makes sense, but I would never think to do it.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah, it feels wrong almost. Yeah. Like, really, I'm just gonna make a.
it's like you're writing inline JavaScript. It's almost. That's what it feels like.
that's just not even my field.
How easy to make another site without building
No,
Russian?
it's more just like you are the lead of the company.
What do you filter?
Jobs, software engineering.
Yeah, do jobs on it or something. And then do jobs on
While we're talking about this, you guys know the job fair is tomorrow, yeah?
Yes.
Tomorrow morning, right?
Yeah.
So you guys know the spiel by now, right? It's 9 until noon, and it's actually over in the automotive building this time, the Rodenheiser building, which is across the way. I think they put us in one room. They tried to organize us by the IT division, so I think it's building number 2, room number 2, whatever they want to call it.
So there's only companies over in that building?
Yeah, they're all over there this time. Just trying different things, figure out what works. They've done that in the past, and they moved us over here. They moved us back and forth.
Where do we park tomorrow?
So,
That's it. Oh, where's that facility?
this name of this the textbooks use that before. So really, what is this doing? So it's getting basically the ID of the to-do, putting it, well, the name of, so the name of todo.id, I think that's just going to say ID, todo.id. I'll inspect this on the front end and see what the name value resolves into. But when I've seen this in the past, there's been an easier syntax to code that, but regardless, it looks like we'll have some buttons here to take a task list. If the status is open, then we have a close button. In this last column. Of course, we don't have any tasks yet, so none of this is going to be doing anything. Close the table, close the form, then we have another form. Okay, that calls the delete completed method. Close the form, close the div, close the div. Shouldn't be a whole lot going on there now, but we should see some buttons to route us to the add view that doesn't exist yet. Aha. Aha. I'm going to venture to say, so that, yeah, many students said they had this, and so filter string was lowercase. We came into the model, capitalized it, and fixed it. Let's go back to the model. Was that lowercase? No.
The one that comes in as a parameter is lowercase, and then that one actually.
That one was not. It's interesting that three of us did the same thing.
It's normal, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, let's rerun that. Okay, home add, at least that's routing to the right place. Of course, this doesn't exist. So I would expect that. But at this point, our button routes to home add. And let me just double check this code on that delete. Completed task, button type of submit. Of course I need oh, that's just gonna call the mark complete action. And the controller mark complete post. Okay, let me see. Form ASP action, method is post. Feedback filters, filter string. That might need these names to actually be populated in order to send that into this method right here to actually hit this breakpoint. So I think we might need to finish flushing this out for that to work. Just let me double check. Yeah. Should be good to go there. All right, long one, but we're almost there. Let's create an add view home. I hear. Actually, I remember doing the to-do task list with you guys in JavaScript, and I think we did it again in React, if I'm remembering right. So is it at least the third time, I want to say? Okay, that's the first two divs. Let me just glance at that, make sure my drop down list is getting there, and we can click navigate there. Okay, okay. It's the first two divs. I do notice for the due dates, they're always using, they use the input type of text instead of the input type of date, and that's always curious to me why, as if it's not compatible. You would think that you would use the newer HTML5 type. Hey Sam, side note, did you are you working on deploying your issue tracker?
I tried for a little bit, but I couldn't get the back end to work. I'm sure if I looked into it more.
If you kept digging.
But
Okay.
no luck so far.
Okay. I was getting some notifications that you were doing some things there. Okay. 1, 2, 3 divs. Here's 4. Now this one's just like category. I'm gonna copy category ID and paste it because step 4. Status ID, status ID, status, view bag, statuses, status ID and name. And I noticed this one does not have an empty option in it. that took a while for someone who even types fast. So let's see if we can add a task, or see what breaks. Wash the car. Home. Due date.
Oh, you're missing
We're missing a column.
columns. Category.
Description,
Status.
category, due date, status.
And there's like a blank one for the buttons.
Yep. So that's going to be on the view. And yep, right here. There we go. There we go. Wash the car. Work. Due date. Okay, so we get the background color of warning on those two, right? So we got the overdue. Is the task overdue? If so, give it a BG of warning. So by applying the BG of warning to the classes, we get those background colors of yellow there. Again, task overdue. If we go into our to-do, overdue is a property, returns true or false. If the status is open and the due date is less than today. Okay, continuing to look at this. Now, I want to boot this up with my breakpoint. On my home controller, mark completed breakpoint. Okay. Well, it worked. And it didn't hit my breakpoint, did I not? Try that again. Oh, that was marked complete, not deleted.
Should I send you that? Or keep it on that side? Maybe I can.
Here's delete.
I have it all left. Showing off the petty option, RGB. About that. That way should be centered. Yeah. I don't know if it's gonna.
So this is what's kind of newer in this chapter, guys, and so that's why I thought I wanted to maybe draw your attention to it. You notice that on the action method called mark complete, we take an ID and we hard code the attribute from the route. So you can see that kind of comes in as all. You know, that's the ID parameter. That's the name of that segment that comes after the action and the controller. And then it also passes in a to-do object, and if you kind of look at that, everything's empty or null except for the ID of 2. And so you have to kind of go back to your index and that's basically this name is passing in the ID of 2, to-do ID. Obviously that's your primary key, so it's passing in the value of 2, and that's why basically it's coming in as this object with an ID property of 2. Then you hit the database, basically query the database by its ID, store that in selected, and then assuming that's not null, which it's not, should step over that. So selected now, we actually have a description and a category ID. So it's not null, so we step in. We set the status ID from open to closed and save changes. So now I've marked them both completed. Delete the completed tasks. Same thing on the adding a new to do. So if I kind of go into my controller, our add method brings in a to do object, and this task is going to be populated from the names or these ASP4. Since this is a strongly typed model, these ASP4s link up to that.